Kyle Jennings. A man with calloused hands, a military past, and a heart he rarely showed the world. His suit was tailored just right, but his nervous fidgeting betrayed the soldier's stoicism. He wasn't used to dressing up. He wasn't used to crying, either. But when he saw Lila Monroe walking down the aisle, tears welled up in his eyes before he could blink them away. Lila was radiant. She wore a satin gown that hugged her body like it was sewn from starlight. Her smile was subtle, her stride graceful, her entire aura magnetic. People whispered as she walked, "She's breathtaking. They look so in love." He's lucky, real lucky. In a way, Kyle knew he was. He'd spent years alone after returning from his final deployment overseas. Relationships were short, shallow, or scarred by his emotional distance. But then came Lila, mysterious, eloquent, and fiercely private. They met one late night at a grocery store checkout, both reaching for the same bag of trail mix. What started as casual conversation turned into hours on the phone, dinner dates, late-night drives, and eventually love. To Kyle, she was everything he didn't know he needed. Someone who didn't probe too hard about his past, but also didn't shrink from his intensity. Lila accepted him, soothed him, challenged him. And when she finally said yes to his trembling proposal under a dimly lit gas station canopy where they'd first kissed, he felt like the luckiest man alive. Their wedding was a celebration not just of love, but of transformation, of finding something real in a world that had always felt temporary. But while Kyle shared nearly everything about his past, his deployments in Iraq, his dishonorable discharge turned honorable after an appeal, the nightmares that still haunted him, Lila never spoke of her childhood. Not once. And when he asked about her parents, she'd simply say, "They're not in the picture." Kyle didn't push. He respected boundaries. Or maybe he feared what was behind them. After all, everyone has a past. Kyle had just never imagined that Lila's could be one he'd come to fear more than his own. The honeymoon came and went. They returned to their small home in South Charlotte, a cozy two-bedroom with creaky floors and a porch swing Lila had picked out from a thrift store. Kyle made her breakfast every Sunday. Lila left love notes in his lunch bag. To anyone looking from the outside, the Jennings household was a romantic picture of marital bliss. But underneath the comfort, a quiet tension existed, not between them, but within Lila. She knew the truth about who she was, about what she had been. She had crossed state lines to start over. New name, new ID, new life, and now a new husband. She had planned to tell him. She practiced it in front of the mirror, wrote it in letters she never gave him. But every time she looked at his face, so trusting, so proud to be her man, the words died in her throat. And then it happened, one small event that would unravel everything. One dizzy spell, one fainting episode, and suddenly Lila was in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines. Kyle was pacing the ER floor, anxious and desperate. And a doctor walked in, a doctor who recognized her face, but not the name she now used. What happened next would turn the love story of Kyle and Lila Jennings into a headline that shocked the nation. It was a Sunday morning like any other. Kyle had just finished frying bacon, humming a low country tune while flipping pancakes, when he heard a loud crash from the hallway. He rushed out and found Lila collapsed, motionless, her silk robe twisted around her legs and her eyes fluttering open in slow confusion. "Lila! Lila! Can you hear me?" She blinked, then nodded faintly. Her skin felt clammy, her pulse weak, and even though she insisted she was fine, just a little dizzy, Kyle wasn't taking any chances. Within minutes, she was bundled into his pickup and rushed to Carolina Memorial Hospital. In the ER, Kyle paced back and forth like a caged animal. He hated hospitals. The antiseptic smell, the distant beeping of heart monitors, they triggered something in him. His tours overseas had left him with more than just scars and bad dreams. But this was about Lila, and if there was one person in the world who could pull him out of his darkness, it was her. He clutched her purse in his lap, unaware of what would soon surface inside that sterile building. Behind the double doors, Lila was taken for a full checkup, blood tests, scans, and vitals. She was still conscious, answering questions softly, politely, but there was visible panic behind her eyes. When the nurse asked her if she had a medical history she should be aware of, Lila hesitated. Then she whispered, "It's in the file. Just, please be discreet." That nurse didn't know what she meant, but the computer did. When her name was entered into the hospital system, it returned an unexpected match. Past patient. Same birthday. Same face. But the name? Liam Monroe. The nurse blinked. She clicked through the old file. Hormone therapy. Gender dysphoria diagnosis. Gender reassignment surgery. Legal transition paperwork. Everything was there, sealed, old, but real. The system automatically flagged the anomaly, a standard protocol for identity discrepancies. It sent a quiet alert to the attending physician. That physician was Dr. Miles Carter, and he remembered Liam Monroe vividly. Dr. Carter had seen Lila or Liam 5 years ago in his early stages of transition. He remembered how nervous and shy Liam had been, barely meeting his eyes. Over the course of a year, Dr. Carter had overseen the hormone therapy, the referrals, the psychological evaluations, and eventually the surgery. He remembered thinking how courageous Liam was, how he bloomed into himself, how he walked taller with every passing month, and how, eventually, he vanished from the system as many transgender patients did after starting over. Until now, until this morning, Dr. Carter looked over her new name, saw her wedding band, and felt a knot form in his chest. He debated with himself for over an hour. Confidentiality? Ethics? Honesty? What was the right move? He knew the risk, but he also saw something in the husband's eyes, devotion, yes, but also control. After wrestling with his conscience, Dr. Carter made the fateful decision. He called Kyle into his office, alone. "Is she okay?" Kyle asked, sitting across from him, his leg bouncing, jaw clenched. "She's stable. The fainting was likely due to low blood sugar and stress." "Nothing major," Dr. Carter said, pausing, unsure how to start. "But there's something else. Something I feel obligated to share with you as her emergency contact." Kyle stiffened. "Okay." The doctor took a breath, then leaned in. "Kyle, Lila wasn't born female." Silence. "What?" "She's transgender. She transitioned several years ago. She's legally female now, but she was born male." Kyle's face went blank. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. The words bounced off the walls like echoes from a gunshot. "You're saying my wife is a man?" "No," Dr. Carter corrected gently. "She's a woman, but she transitioned. She's undergone full reassignment. I'm only telling you this because I believe you should know." I understand this is a lot." Kyle stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the chair. "Does she know you told me this?" "No." Without another word, Kyle walked out of the office. Back in the hospital room, Lila smiled faintly when she saw him. "Hey, I'm okay," she whispered. "They said it was nothing serious." Kyle didn't speak. He helped her dress, drove her home, and didn't say a single word the entire ride. Lila knew. She could feel it in his silence, the shift in his energy, the coldness in his eyes. It was as if the man who kissed her so gently that morning no longer existed, like something inside him had shut down. She tried to break the ice. She cooked dinner that night, wore his favorite t-shirt, laughed nervously at old inside jokes. But Kyle said nothing. When they went to bed, he rolled away from her. And that night, Lila cried in silence, curled on the edge of the mattress, knowing in her heart. He knew, and she didn't know what he was going to do about it. The next morning, the birds chirped as they always did. The coffee pot hissed on cue, and the sun rose over the sleepy Charlotte suburbs like nothing had changed. But everything had. Kyle sat at the kitchen table, staring at his black coffee. No sugar, no milk, just bitter, like the taste in his mouth since yesterday. Across from him, Lila moved around the kitchen with care, acting as though things were normal, as though the wall of silence between them didn't exist. She slid him a plate of eggs and toast, then sat down opposite him. "You didn't say anything last night," she said gently, her eyes searching his. "Did the doctor say something? About my tests?" He looked up slowly. A pause. Then, he said you were fine. That was all. Lila's heart sank. He knew. She could see it. She had dreaded this moment for so long, had feared the consequences of her silence. But she'd convinced herself that Kyle, her Kyle, might understand, might still love her. She reached for his hand, but he pulled his away. That was the first wound. The next few days were quiet, almost ghostly. Kyle didn't yell. He didn't hit. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he withdrew. He slept in the spare room. He worked late at the garage. When he came home, he barely looked at her. Lila, desperate, tried to explain. She wrote him a letter and left it on his pillow, pouring out the whole truth. Her childhood, the bullying, the confusion, the moment she finally embraced who she was. The surgeries, the years of hiding, the courage it took to finally love herself enough to be loved by someone else. She ended it with a single line. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to be whole with you. Kyle read the letter, then tore it in half and threw it in the trash. Inside Kyle's mind, a storm was building. He thought of the wedding, of his family, of the friends who had clapped him on the back and said, "You did good, man." The men from his platoon who'd always joked about chicks with dicks and warned him never to trust anyone too perfect. He felt duped, humiliated, like he had become the punchline of a joke everyone else was in on. He stared at their wedding photo on the mantel, the smiling couple under a floral arch. But now all he could see was a lie. His masculinity felt shattered. His trust, gone. Late at night, he sat on the porch, the gun he kept in the garage on his lap. A Glock 19. Registered. Legal. He wasn't thinking straight. His thoughts weren't logical. They were a chaotic tangle of anger, shame, betrayal, and something deeper, something darker. What would people say if they found out? What would his friends think? His parents? He didn't want to be a joke, a headline, a meme. And in his twisted, unraveling mind, there was only one way to end the humiliation. Meanwhile, Lila had made a decision of her own. She couldn't keep living like this. Not in fear. Not in silence. She started packing a bag. Just a few clothes. Some money. Her ID. She'd leave while he was at work. Go to a friend's house. Start over again. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. Dust motes floated in the air, peaceful and still. A deceptive calm before everything would break. Lila was in the bedroom, packing in silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded her favorite sweater. The one Kyle once said made her eyes look like ocean glass. She paused, her chest tight with guilt, grief, and fear. She loved him. Despite it all, she loved him. But love, she now understood, wasn't always enough. Down the hallway, she heard the front door creak open, much earlier than she expected. Kyle. Her stomach twisted into a knot. She quickly zipped her bag and took a steadying breath, telling herself she'd explain everything one last time. Try once more to reach the man she fell in love with. But the footsteps that approached were different, heavy, slow, deliberate. Not the worn-out shuffling of a tired mechanic, but the slow rhythm of someone carrying a purpose. When he entered the bedroom, she froze. Kyle stood in the doorway, silent, holding something behind his back. She turned. "You're home early," she said, trying to sound calm. Her eyes flicked to his hands, and that's when she saw it. The gun. Her breath caught. "Kyle," she whispered, taking a step back, her voice cracking. "Please, we can talk. We haven't really talked." His face was pale, jaw clenched tight, eyes glassy with rage and disbelief. He didn't yell. He didn't shake. Instead, his voice came out cold, eerily calm. "You were gonna leave," he said. Just like that. Lila's lips quivered. "I didn't want it to end this way. I didn't know how to fix what broke." "You broke it," he said, raising the gun slightly. "You made me into a fool. A laughingstock." "No, Kyle, it was never about hurting you. I love you. I still love you. You tricked me into marrying a man." "I'm not a man," she said firmly, stepping forward. "I'm your wife. I'm Lila. You know me, Everything about me is real. Everything we had was real. He flinched like the words stung worse than the truth. Don't. Her eyes welled up. If you want me to leave, I will. You'll never see me again. Just don't do this. The silence stretched between them like a loaded wire. Then, bang. The shot rang out like thunder in a church. A deafening, heart-stopping crack that shattered every illusion of peace. Lila's body jerked as the bullet tore through her chest. She stumbled backward, hitting the dresser before collapsing to the floor, one hand outstretched, eyes wide, more in shock than pain. Kyle stared at her, breathing hard, the gun still smoking in his hand. Blood spread like a dark blossom across the wooden floor. And just like that, the woman he once called his forever was gone. Outside, a neighbor named Mrs. Porter, watering her petunias, heard the gunshot and froze. She looked toward the Jennings house, their curtains blowing faintly, a strange stillness in the air. She knew something was wrong. She called 911. By the time officers arrived, Kyle was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands stained with blood, the gun resting beside him. I shot her, he muttered blankly when they entered. She lied. Police found Lila's bag packed and ready by the door. Her phone, still unlocked, showed a half-written message to a friend. I'm leaving tonight. I think he knows. The officers didn't need a motive. The motive was everywhere. But what unfolded after would raise far more questions than it answered, about gender identity, about toxic masculinity, about whether truth delayed is betrayal, or whether love betrayed is ever forgivable. In one moment of rage, Kyle Jennings had gone from husband to killer. And Lila Monroe became a national tragedy, a woman who died not because she lied, but because she tried to live. It didn't take long. Within hours of Kyle's arrest, news vans lined the curb outside the small bungalow, once known for its front porch swing and hanging flower pots. Police tape flapped in the wind. Reporters huddled near the yard, microphones outstretched like weapons, aiming for anyone with a story to tell. What had happened inside that home was shocking, but when the details emerged, it became something more, a cultural firestorm. Breaking. Charlotte man kills wife after discovering she was transgender. Trans woman murdered by husband days after wedding. Hate crime or betrayal? Was she hiding or surviving? The Lila Monroe story shakes the nation. It was no longer just about Kyle and Lila. Now, it was about all the Lila Monroes across America. Those who had transitioned, who had found love, and who feared that love would turn violent the moment their truth was discovered. On social media, her name trended within hours. Hashtag Justice for Lila. Hashtag Say Her Name. Hashtag Trans Lives Matter. Activists, celebrities, politicians, and everyday people posted tributes, condemnation, outrage. Some shared their own coming out stories. Others posted photos of Lila, radiant, smiling, alive, the face now etched into national memory. But not everyone offered sympathy. On less sympathetic corners of the internet, dark forums and hateful threads painted Lila as a deceiver, a fraud. Some said Kyle was the victim, a man pushed too far, betrayed by what they called an unforgivable secret. It was the classic divide, empathy versus ignorance, progress versus prejudice. And somewhere in between that war of opinions, Lila's real story got lost. In the courtroom of public opinion, no one wins. But in a courtroom of law, justice still had a chance to be heard. Meanwhile, Kyle sat in a cold interrogation room, silent, staring at his calloused hands. Detective Marla Henson, a 15-year veteran of Charlotte PD, led the questioning. She had seen domestic cases before, hundreds of them, but this one dug under her skin in a way others hadn't. I need you to tell me why you did it, Kyle. He didn't speak at first. Then, because she wasn't who she said she was. You mean because she was trans? He looked up sharply. Because she lied. She let me build a life with her on something fake. She was legally your wife. She loved you. That wasn't love. That was trickery. Detective Henson slammed the file closed. Let me be clear, Kyle. What you did wasn't some outburst of passion. It was premeditated. You brought the gun inside. You walked down that hallway. You pulled the trigger. Kyle said nothing more. He was charged with first-degree murder, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and domestic violence resulting in death. As the case gained traction, Lila's past was put under a microscope. Her school photos from childhood were dug up. Blog posts from her anonymous transition diary surfaced online. Heartfelt entries about feeling trapped, terrified, and alone. Her old name, Liam, was plastered across clickbait headlines. But her friends came forward too. Emily, her college roommate, described Lila as brave and stubborn, the kind of woman who made others feel seen. Her hairstylist, Jaden, said she talked about Kyle like he was the first person who ever made her feel like she didn't have to run anymore. And now she was gone. At her memorial, mourners wore purple, her favorite color, and held candles in a downtown Charlotte park. Pictures of Lila as a bride were framed near flower arrangements. A local poet read aloud the last lines from one of Lila's blog posts. "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not lying. I'm surviving. If someone ever loves me, it'll be because they love me for me. No secrets. Just skin and truth." The crowd wept, because in the end, that truth, the one she fought so hard to live, cost her everything. The courthouse was packed. By the time Kyle Jennings stood before the court, the world had already formed its verdict. Protesters, supporters, curious onlookers, and national news crews surrounded the Mecklenburg County Courthouse like vultures circling a headline. Some waved signs that read "Trans rights are human rights." Others held more venomous messages like "Truth matters. Lila lied." Inside, though, everything came down to evidence, arguments, and the ticking clock of justice. The prosecution versus the defense. Truth versus rage. The lead prosecutor, Angela Roth, was sharp, controlled, and relentless. In her opening statement, she stood in front of the jury with a photo of Lila Monroe, smiling, vibrant, alive. "This is not a story of confusion," Roth began. "This is a story of control, of a man who believed he had the right to take a life when the truth no longer fit his fantasy." She described how Kyle brought a loaded Glock into the house, how he had days to cool off, how he chose silence over separation, and murder over conversation. He could have walked away, but he didn't. Instead, he fired a bullet into a woman who loved him. That is not passion. That is premeditated murder. She called several witnesses. Dr. Miles Carter, the physician who revealed Lila's medical history, testified that Kyle didn't react violently at the hospital, but his demeanor changed drastically. Mrs. Porter, the neighbor, told the court she heard the shot and found Kyle sitting calmly on the bed afterward. Detective Henson replayed the interrogation tape where Kyle said, "She tricked me." Then came the most haunting testimony, Lila's best friend, Emily. Emily took the stand, tears in her eyes, and read aloud the last message Lila had sent her. "I'm scared, Em. I think he knows. I keep hoping the Kyle I married is still in there. But I'm packing just in case." There was silence in the courtroom. You could hear the sniffles. Kyle's defense attorney, Mark Delaney, took a very different approach. He framed the case around emotional betrayal, not hate. "What would you do?" Delaney asked the jury. "If you discovered your entire marriage was built on a lie, if the person you shared your bed with, dreamed children with, kept something this enormous from you?" He painted Kyle as a loving, devoted husband who had been psychologically shattered by the discovery that his wife was not who he believed her to be. Delaney didn't deny the shooting, but he argued for manslaughter, not murder. A crime of emotional distress. A man who snapped. They brought in a psychologist who testified that Kyle suffered from undiagnosed PTSD from his military service, and that the discovery triggered a fight or flight response. The defense even subpoenaed Lila's sealed transition records, suggesting that Kyle had a right to know, and that her omission played a role in the outcome. This caused public outcry. Activists called it a dangerous precedent, blaming a murder victim for her own death. But in court, strategy was everything. On the fourth day, Kyle Jennings took the stand. He wore a navy suit, no tie, hair cut clean, jaw set hard. His voice was steady. "I loved her," he said. I really did. When asked why he killed her, his eyes welled up, but not from guilt. She took something from me. My pride. My faith. My future. She lied, he added. And I couldn't unhear the doctor's words. I couldn't erase the image. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed to shift in her chair, uncomfortable. Angela Roth stood for cross-examination. You had time to leave, Mr. Jennings. Hours. Days even. Why didn't you just walk away? Kyle didn't answer. You didn't snap, Mr. Jennings. You stewed. You brought a gun into that bedroom. You watched her pack. You could have opened the door and let her leave. But instead, you raised that gun and ended her life. Kyle looked away. Roth stared him down. Was that love, Mr. Jennings? Or was that power? After 9 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom was packed. Lila's mother sat in the front row, clinging to a photo of her daughter as a child. Before the world had told her she wasn't enough, before men with guns tried to silence her truth. The judge read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Lila Monroe Jennings, we find the defendant, Kyle Thomas Jennings, guilty. Gasps. Tears. A quiet wail from Emily. Even a juror wiped her eye. Kyle showed no emotion.